Before dawn on a cold March morning in 1997, a police captain was patrolling the quiet outskirts of a small town in North Carolina when something made him slow his car down. There, parked right on the shoulder of the highway, sat a red Jeep, headlights blazing, just sitting there. Something about it didn't feel right. He pulled over. As he climbed out of his patrol car and walked toward the Jeep, he could hear the engine still running. The driver's side window was all the way down. He swung his flashlight around and came up to the window and stopped cold. The seat was empty. No driver. No one in the back. Nobody in sight in any direction. And then, in the dead silence of that empty highway, the cell phone sitting on the passenger seat lit up and began to ring. But before I tell you what happened when he answered it, let me take you all the way back to the beginning, because that was my Jeep, and I was the one who had vanished into the dark. My name is Kim Medlin. On the night this story begins, I was 26 years old, blonde, and very much alive. It was the early morning hours of Saturday, March 29th, 1997, and I was weaving my way through a haze of cigar smoke inside a men's club in Charlotte, North Carolina, carrying a tray loaded with filet mignon. I was dressed in a leotard and tights, navigating around the edge of the stage, past the music and the noise, making my rounds. I worked here 3 or 4 nights a week, and honestly, I liked the job. It paid well. The tips were solid, and because I worked nights, my days were completely my own, and my days were everything. I had 2 real passions in life, my horses and my home. My husband Bridger and I had recently bought 7 acres of land just outside the town of Monroe, the town where Bridger had actually grown up. We'd spent the better part of a year building our dream home from the ground up. A real home, one with a barn for our 3 horses, a yard, space to breathe. The construction had just finished, and we were finally in the middle of moving in and making it feel like ours. Hanging pictures, unpacking boxes, turning walls into rooms and rooms into a life. So that night, as I moved between tables and delivered orders with a smile, I kept glancing at the clock on the wall, less than an hour left in my shift. 3 full days off stretched out ahead of me like a gift. I could already picture myself back at the house, music playing, coffee in hand, figuring out where the last few things would go. I was excited, genuinely, simply excited about going home. A little after 2:03 in the morning, I pushed out through the back entrance of the bar. Now wrapped in a baggy sweatshirt I'd pulled on over my work clothes, I called out a goodbye to a few co-workers, crossed the parking lot, and got into my red Jeep. I dropped my purse onto the cowprint seat cover on the passenger seat. A little detail I loved about that car: started the engine, found something good on the radio, and headed out. The drive home was about an hour, south down Old Charlotte Highway, a secluded 2-lane road, trees on both sides, almost nobody out there at that hour. I used to find it peaceful, even relaxing. That late-night stillness, the road to myself, just me and the music. But lately, something had changed. Lately, that same drive had been making my stomach tighten. Because 2 weeks earlier, something had happened on that exact road that I couldn't get out of my head. I had been driving home from work, same highway, same time of night, when a vehicle came up fast from behind me and just latched onto my bumper, tailgating me, honking, aggressive, relentless, seemingly out of nowhere. My first thought was that it was a customer from the club. Someone who had watched me working, figured out my car, and was now following me home in the dark. The thought turned my blood cold. I spotted a convenience store up ahead with a police cruiser parked in the lot, and I pulled straight in without even thinking. I walked directly to the officer and told him what was happening. He took it seriously. He got on the radio and sent out a broadcast to all officers on duty. Keep an eye out for my red Jeep on the nights I was working this road, in case someone gave me trouble again. He said they had my back. It helped, but only so much, because that driver was never found, never identified, and every time I turned back onto Old Charlotte Highway alone at night, I thought about it. So on this particular night, to settle my nerves, I reached into my purse and grabbed my cell phone. I called Bridger. He picked up right away. He was on the road too, actually, just getting back from a DJing gig at a prom in a town a couple of hours away, almost home. We talked for a few minutes, easy and comfortable the way you only get with someone you know completely. Then he said he was pulling into our driveway and he'd call me right back once he was inside. I said okay. We hung up. I kept driving. About 15 minutes later, just before 3 in the morning, my phone rang again. Bridger, calling back exactly like he promised. He asked if I was close. I told him I'd just passed the Union Station restaurant, which meant I was roughly 20 minutes out. He said he was exhausted, it had been a long night, and that he was heading to bed. In case he was asleep by the time I walked in, he wanted to say goodnight. I said goodnight back. I set the phone down on the passenger seat, and then I looked up at the road, and the world behind me exploded into white light. A sudden, blinding flash flooded my rearview mirror. I squinted. Someone was right behind me, headlights blazing, almost on top of my bumper, and then came the lights on the roof of the vehicle, flashing, red and blue. Back at our house, Bridger jolted awake and looked at the clock on the nightstand, 3:59 in the morning. He lay there for a moment, fuzzy with sleep. Then it registered. I wasn't in bed. He sat up. I should have been home almost 40 minutes ago. He got up and moved through the house room by room. Kitchen, living room, still half full of unpacked boxes. Every room was dark. Every room was empty. He looked out the window at the driveway. My Jeep wasn't there. He picked up the phone and dialed my cell number. It rang once, twice, and then a man's voice answered. Not mine. A man's voice? Bridger's heart dropped straight through the floor. He asked who he was speaking to. The man said he was a police officer with the Monroe Public Safety Department. Bridger asked, and you can only imagine what it felt like to have to ask this, "Where's my wife?" The officer said he didn't know. He had come across a red Jeep idling on the shoulder of Old Charlotte Highway. There was a phone inside it ringing. He answered it. But he said, flatly, "There's nobody here." A little after 4 in the morning, Assistant Chief Bobby Hulk of the Monroe Public Safety Department was driving north along Old Charlotte Highway with his flashlight and his instincts, both on full alert. Hulk was a seasoned investigator, methodical, experienced. He drove past darkened parking lots and quiet houses until he reached the edge of town, and then he saw it. My red Jeep pulled onto the opposite shoulder, with a patrol car sitting right behind it. He pulled a U-turn and parked. Captain David Simpson was waiting. Simpson laid it out quickly. He'd found the Jeep idling on the roadside about 15 minutes ago. Headlights on, engine running, window down. No driver. He'd looked inside, seen the phone, and when it rang, he answered it on instinct. The man on the other end was panicking, said his name was Kim Medlin, said it was his wife's phone, said she never came home. Simpson had also recognized the Jeep. He'd had a brief encounter with me 2 weeks earlier, right after that road rage incident, when I'd flagged down him and another officer at a convenience store parking lot. He'd put it together. Hulk knew the Medlin name. He and Bridger were actually friends. He took out his flashlight and leaned carefully into the Jeep to look around. On the passenger seat, lying open, was my wallet. He checked it slowly. Credit cards, still there. Cash, still there. But the clear plastic slot where a driver's license would normally sit, empty. Clean, like it had been deliberately removed, like I had taken it out specifically to hand to someone. Their first theory, maybe I had been pulled over by a cop and taken out my ID. But Monroe's department was small. There were only a handful of officers working at that hour. Hulk turned to Simpson right there on the shoulder and asked, had any on-duty officers made a stop that night in this area? Simpson had already checked. None of them had. So if it wasn't a real officer who pulled me over, who had I handed my license to? Hulk's mind went somewhere dark. He'd heard the stories most cops had. Blue light bandits, they were called. People who put flashing lights on their personal vehicles and pulled over unsuspecting drivers, using the authority of those lights to get people to stop, to get out of their cars, to comply. It happened most often to women, driving alone, late at night. It was rare, but It was real. Hulk didn't want to get ahead of himself, but the thought was there now, and he couldn't push it away. Just then, he heard an engine and saw headlights approaching fast from up the highway. He walked over as a black pickup truck braked hard and pulled in behind his patrol car. The door swung open and a tall man with blonde hair practically jumped out. Hulk recognized him immediately, his friend, and my husband, Bridger. Bridger looked frantic. He demanded to know what happened to his wife. Hulk told him to slow down, that they were working on it, that right now there was no sign of a struggle. No broken glass, no slashed tires, and it was possible I'd had car trouble and gone to find help. But Bridger didn't wait for permission. He stepped around Hulk and climbed directly into the driver's seat of my Jeep. Hulk told him to get out. Bridger didn't listen. He put the car in drive, rolled it forward a few inches, then put it in reverse and backed it up, parked it right back where it had been. Then he looked at Hulk. The car worked fine. Hulk was annoyed. This was a potential crime scene, and Bridger had just walked through it, but he also knew something was wrong here. He got on his radio and called for backup and a K9 unit. A few minutes later, 2 more patrol cars pulled up. Officers fanned out. A handler brought over the police dog, who climbed into the Jeep and worked through my belongings carefully, memorizing my scent. Then the dog dropped down onto the pavement and picked up a trail. The officers told Bridger, who very clearly wanted to follow, to stay with his truck. Then they followed the dog about 100 yards down the road before it veered onto a driveway. A long driveway through the trees, leading toward a small house sitting back off the highway. The dog followed the scent all the way to the garage, and then it stopped. Hulk rang the doorbell. A light came on. A moment later, a man appeared in the doorway, and despite the fact that it was the middle of the night and police were standing on his porch, he looked wide awake, almost like he'd been expecting them. His name was Nathan Hargett. Hulk asked if he'd seen or heard anything unusual near his property in the past few hours. Nathan said yes, actually. About an hour ago, around 3:45 in the morning, a strange car had woken him up. It was loitering near his garage. He didn't recognize it. But he noticed it had Texas plates, and he'd caught a glimpse of a woman in the back seat, blonde. Hulk asked to search the property. Nathan said, "Go ahead." Officers took the house. Hulk went straight for the garage. The side door was unlocked. He pushed it open and swept his flashlight across the interior. A truck, some gardening tools, nothing out of place, no sign of me. By the time the sky started to lighten around 600 in the morning, this was officially a missing persons case. Community volunteers and officers spread out through the woods along Old Charlotte Highway, calling my name, sweeping the tree lines. Meanwhile, Hulk and Simpson drove back to the station to dig through anything the overnight dispatcher might have on record from the night before. Nathan had been cleared. What they needed now was that car, the one with Texas plates, and whoever was behind the wheel. But the dispatcher had no traffic stops, no suspicious vehicle reports, nothing useful. What they did have, though, was one incident earlier that night. Around 2:00 in the morning, about an hour before I vanished, a car had gone off the road into a ditch not far from where my Jeep was found. Hulk asked who responded. The dispatcher said it was car 491, a young rookie officer named Josh Griffin. Hulk called him immediately. Griffin said he'd responded to the scene, called a tow truck, and by around 2:30 in the morning, the car had been hauled out and he'd gone home. His shift was done. Hulk crossed it off. If the car in the ditch was already gone by 2:30, it wasn't the same car Nathan had seen loitering outside his garage at 3:45. The timing didn't fit. Griffin wasn't a lead. But the road rage incident, that was still sitting in the back of Hulk's mind, he asked Simpson to pull the report from 2 weeks earlier. The one filed the night I'd been followed on Old Charlotte Highway. Maybe somehow that driver had come back. When the report came, Hulk read it carefully. The incident had taken place in the early morning hours of Saturday, March 15th, exactly 2 weeks to the day before my disappearance. I'd pulled into a convenience store and flagged down Captain Simpson and his partner that night. Simpson's partner, Hulk noted, was an officer named Roger Griffin. Simpson and Roger Griffin had tracked down the car that had been following me. There were two men inside, Eric Williams and George Connell, and they'd claimed it was a misunderstanding. They thought I was the one flashing lights at them. To the officers on scene that night, it looked like exactly that, a misunderstanding. They let them go. Hulk called both men. They both had solid, verifiable alibis for the night I disappeared. But something about the pattern still bothered him. Same road, same time of night, same night of the week, 2 weeks apart, almost to the hour. That was a lot of coincidences stacking up in the same place, and Hulk didn't like coincidences. Just after sunset on Sunday, March 30th, the day after I vanished, Hulk turned his car down Westwood Industrial Drive. It was a dead-end road, deserted and isolated, tucked at the edge of town about 2 miles from where my Jeep had been found. People in Monroe knew this road by another name, Lover's Lane, a secluded spot where people went when they didn't want to be seen. Up ahead, Hulk could see the flicker of flashlights through the trees and the blue-white flash of police strobes. He parked and walked into the woods. Officers were stretching crime scene tape around a small clearing, and there on the ground, partially hidden under a pile of roofing shingles and broken branches, 2 sneakers were sticking out. Earlier that evening, 2 men who had been part of the community search effort had stumbled across the spot. They called it in immediately and hadn't touched anything. Now, as the forensics team carefully removed the debris, Hulk knelt down with his flashlight. It was a woman. It was me. I was wearing a pair of shorts, a bra, and the same baggy sweatshirt I'd put on when I left work the night before, except it had been pulled up over my head and tangled around my wrists. One side of my face had been beaten severely. There were bruises and cuts across my neck, scrapes on my knees. My wedding ring and necklace were both still on. This was not a robbery. As the forensics team carefully worked to untangle the sweatshirt from around my wrists so they could collect nail clippings, hoping I had scratched my attacker and left some DNA behind, Hulk watched one officer start to fold the sweatshirt toward an evidence bag. He stopped them. He leaned in with his flashlight and angled the beam across the fabric, and there, pressed into the material, was a shoe print. A clear, distinct shoe print. He told them to get that sweatshirt to the crime lab immediately. He needed to know the size, the brand, the tread pattern, everything. While he waited on those results, Hulk turned over what he already knew. 2 things stood out clearly. First, Westwood Industrial Drive wasn't somewhere a stranger to town would think of. Whoever brought me here knew this area, they were local. Second, and this one kept pulling at him, there was no sign of a struggle at my Jeep, no chaos, no damage, no signs that I'd been dragged out or forced, which meant I had almost certainly gotten out of that car on my own. For someone I had trusted enough to step out into the dark for. On Monday, March 31st, Hulk sat down across the interrogation table from his friend, and his first serious murder suspect, my husband, Bridger. There were reasons, real ones. Bridger had been present the moment the investigation started, and he hadn't stayed in his lane. He'd pushed into the crime scene, gotten behind the wheel of my Jeep without permission, potentially contaminating evidence. He'd been aggressive, emotional, almost too involved. And now Hulk had a new problem. A police officer had reported seeing Bridger's black pickup truck driving through the center of town around 2:30 in the morning, which was nowhere near our house, and nowhere near the route Bridger would have taken coming back from his prom DJ gig. Bridger had told police he'd gotten home around 2:30, called me just before 3, and gone straight to bed. That didn't match. Hulk put it to him directly. Another officer had seen his truck in town at 2:30. Why did he lie? Bridger didn't answer calmly. He exploded. He was furious, shaking. He told Hulk he couldn't believe that at a time like this, after just being told his wife was dead, his supposed friend was sitting across from him, accusing him of murder. You're insinuating that I hurt my wife. I didn't do this. He wasn't done. He told Hulk he was wasting time. He said the evidence was right there in front of them. No sign of struggle at the Jeep. The window rolled down. My license missing from my wallet, all of it pointing to a traffic stop. Someone with lights and authority who I would have pulled over for without question. And then Bridger said something that landed hard. I knew Kim better than anyone. She would never have gotten out of that car in the middle of the night for a stranger. Not after what happened 2 weeks ago. She was scared. She never would have done that. Hulk let him go. They had no hard evidence to hold him. But as he watched Bridger walk out, still fuming, still insisting, one thing kept circling in Hulk's mind. Because the same argument Bridger was making to prove his innocence also worked the other way. If I would never get out of my car for a stranger, then maybe I had gotten out for someone I knew. Someone I recognized. Someone I trusted enough to lower my guard for, even on that dark road, even after everything. That cut the suspect pool significantly, and it made Hulk look harder at everyone in my life. He sent his team out to find security camera footage from around town on the night I was killed. If Bridger really had been driving around at 2:30 in the morning, there would be a record of it somewhere. But as the days went by, Hulk also kept chasing the other thread, the one about the blue light bandit, because there was something he hadn't shared publicly yet, something that changed the shape of the whole case. He'd been thinking about that police radio bulletin, the one that Captain Simpson sent out 2 weeks before my murder, after the road rage incident. The bulletin that went over the department radio and told every officer to keep an eye on Old Charlotte Highway late at night, because a woman named Kim Medlin drove that road regularly and alone, and she'd been followed before. Police radios weren't encrypted. They weren't private. Anyone with a scanner could have been listening, and anyone listening what the witness had seen, and punched the gas. They closed the distance quickly and flipped on their lights. Red and blue, roof-mounted, official-looking. I pulled over. Of course I did, because that's what you do. The killer got out and walked up to my driver's side window. I rolled it down just as you would for a police officer and handed over my license. Kim Medlin, right there in their hands. I asked what the problem was. I was polite, probably a little nervous, just wanting to know what I had done wrong, so this could be resolved and I could get home. The killer told me to step out of the vehicle. I must have been confused. Maybe I hesitated for just a moment, but I did what I was told. because the lights said law enforcement. Because in 1997, you trusted that. The moment I was out of the car, the handcuffs went on. My wrists pinned behind my back before I understood what was happening, and then I was being dragged to the back of their vehicle and shoved inside. The door slammed. The engine started. I was crying. I was telling them I hadn't done anything, asking why I was being arrested, where they were taking me. But the person in the front seat wasn't listening, because this had never been about anything I had done. They drove, but they hadn't planned this far. The excitement of the moment had overtaken any real strategy. And now they were behind the wheel with a terrified woman in the back seat, and no clear idea of what came next. They slowed down, idled for a minute, thought, and then they remembered somewhere quiet, somewhere local, somewhere nobody would look. They turned onto Westwood Industrial Drive. As the car turned down that dark dead-end road, I went silent. The stillness must have registered to them because they checked the rearview mirror, and they saw me, hands cuffed behind my back, moving, working, trying the door. They lunged for the power lock controls, too late. The rear door swung open, and I threw myself out of the moving car. They hit the brakes. Hard. They ran back to where I had landed in the road, still alive, hands still locked behind my back, unable to break my fall, and without stopping, without thinking, the flashlight came down, hard, into my face. And then they stomped on my back. And then I will spare the full detail here, because what matters is this: I did not survive what came next. I fought, but I did not survive. When it was over, they dragged me into the trees and covered me with branches and roofing shingles. They went home. They cleaned their car. They were careful, but they left one thing behind: a shoe print pressed into the fabric of my sweatshirt. A very specific tread pattern, a V-shape that the forensics lab was able to identify precisely. It belonged to a boot manufactured by the Thorogood Company, a supplier of military and uniform footwear. And that particular model, it was the exact boot issued to officers of the Monroe Public Safety Department. My killer wasn't pretending to be a police officer. My killer was a police officer. His name was Josh Griffin, the same young rookie officer who had responded to the car in the ditch call earlier that night on Old Charlotte Highway, the same call Hulk had already looked into and dismissed because the timing seemed off. What Hulk hadn't known yet was the other connection. Josh was the son of Officer Roger Griffin, the same Officer Roger Griffin who had been Captain Simpson's partner the night of my road rage incident 2 weeks before my murder. Roger Griffin had told his son about the call, about the woman in the red Jeep, about the bulletin on the radio, about when and where I drove, and the fact that I drove it alone. Josh Griffin had been watching for me ever since, learning my patterns, waiting for the right moment. He was arrested on May 30th, 1997, 2 months after he killed me. Eventually convicted of first-degree kidnapping and first-degree murder, sentenced to life in prison. As for his motive, why me? Why any of this, investigators and prosecutors could only offer what the evidence showed. He had become obsessed. He had seen me, learned about me through his father's police work, and fixated. And then, using the very badge and authority that were meant to protect people like me, he had turned that obsession into something that could never be taken back. I was 26 years old. I had horses I loved and a house I was still decorating and a husband waiting up for me to come home. I had 3 days off ahead of me and a life I was building, piece by piece, on 7 acres in Monroe. I never made it home that night, but I haven't been forgotten, and now you know my name,